Yeah, I always tell people it's simple, it's not easy. And those are different. Things that are easy, you can do mindlessly, you can casually flitter about, and it just will happen. But like things can be simple, but you have to still be intentional about it.
Y'all, we are back for another season of Rich in Real Life. I am ecstatic to bring you this content, and we are going to go to the next phase of my journey, and I'm going to take you with me. We are back for another episode of Rich in Real Life with a repeat guest who I feel like might be our resident expert in teaching us how to human. Someone I consider a soul friend who is also really doing her thing out there. Inclusion's award-winning strategist, inclusion expert, author, two-time author, and just, y'all, I love this woman. And the fact that she comes on the show and shares this with you, like, listen to this episode because it is literally, it's a little bit Rich in Real Life After Dark, but it is also some stuff that you can literally implement in your own personal life right now that would literally be you making a decision to do something that would change the world. So without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce again to you guys, Amber Cabral. And congratulations, by the way, because you just did this incredible TED Talk.
Woo! Hardest thing I ever did. Hardest thing I ever did. So glad it's done. People keep saying like your first TED Talk. I'm like, no.
My last. My first, my last.
Ever doing that again. I'll write 5 more books. I'm not doing that. So yes. Whew, thank you. It's done.
So what the TED Talk that you did is about, we'll get into eventually because I think it is so important. But like, as I mentioned, it is literally something I think that everyone can learn from because it's, if all of us could grasp this in the world would literally be a better place. And one of my favorite things about learning from you is that it's the things that you want people to implement are really not that hard.
No.
They're in fact very simple.
Always.
And so I want to start here.
Yeah, I always tell people it's simple, it's not easy. And those are different. Things that are easy, you can do mindlessly, you can casually flitter about, and it just will happen. But like things can be simple, but you have to still be intentional about it. It is simple to tie your shoes, but you have to pay attention a little bit to make sure, okay, is one side too long? Oh, it's not. Let me pull the string through. Let me adjust. It's that kind of thing. It requires you to be intentional. So I teach a lot of things that are very, 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 very simple, but they're not easy. And so you have to practice. You have to deliberately decide, okay, this is how I want to experience life with others. This is how I want people to experience me. This is the way I think the world should shift so that we can experience the world better. And I think about that in terms of like simple actions because like, let's be real, like we got a lot of solutions. Most of them are like, yo, how are we gonna ever get that done? You know what I'm saying? So like, to have something where it's like, yo, do you know how much of a difference we could make if we just shifted our mindset in this way? Like if you just step 2 degrees to the left, you know? And so I try to make things that are that. So it's like, it does require effort and time and intention, but it's not a thing that you'll hear and go like, oh my God, how am I ever gonna get there?
Right.
And that's, I teach that way purposefully. I want every single person to feel like equity is accessible to them.
I love what you just said because it makes me think all these corporate companies and just the world in general, especially being that like DEI is dying, and we'll get into that in a minute because it's not, but that like they're like these huge, massive outcomes, which is what you're basically saying. Like there are these huge, massive outcomes of like, we need to transform the culture and this and that and the third and it needs to be equitable and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But like you literally teach things that you're like, if you didn't know you'd be like, that's it?
Until you try it.
Right.
Until you try it and you realize that it's hard. So a simple example of that is speaking up.
Right.
Like when I tell people I wrote a book, my book is called Say More About That, you know, and it teaches people
It's
how to
called
speak up. Say more about that.
Okay.
Say more about that. Because I say it all the time.
Right.
But it teaches people how to speak up. And when I say that to people, they're like, oh, I don't need help with that. And then I go, okay. And then they call me when they don't know how to tell their boss that their boss is making their job hard. Oh, so you need help speaking up. Mm-hmm. So like the things that I talk about are things that you're encountering and using every day, or you're avoiding them because it's like, ooh, that's uncomfortable. And oh, it's kind of small. I just won't do it. But the little things count. And we know that. Those of us who have children, I don't, but you have children. I have a little person in my life right now. So like, it's the tiny little things that make all the difference for them. They want the routines. They want the thoughtfulness.
Yes.
It is simple. It's not easy.
No.
It takes a lot of your energy.
Yes.
It takes a lot of your thought.
Yes.
You have to be very, very purposeful and tactical. We are the same as adults. We are the same. We still need the language. We still need to know, like, oh my gosh, what's the best way for me to approach this? Right. So when I tell people I wrote a book about speaking up, their initial response is dismissive, like almost like, oh, okay.
I know how to do that.
Until they need help with it. And then when they need help with it, it's like, Amber, how do I tell this person that the way they talk to me is wildly inappropriate and that I want to choke them? Well, don't say that. Okay.
But there is a way to speak up for yourself.
So first, who is the person? Okay. It's your boss. Okay, great. And then, do you have a good relationship with the boss? How do you connect? Like, do you feel like you're close with them? Do you not? Is it just a working relationship? Oh, it's just a working relationship. I consider them a colleague. Do you think highly of them? Do they have a lot to contribute? Give me the lay of the land. Oh, okay, that's great. You have a good relationship. You're not super close. It's your boss. Ask them a good question. Hey, have you considered that your approach to this conversation could maybe be a little bit different and maybe that might shape the outcome of the discussion? Are you open to some feedback about the way we engage? Because I think I have recommendations that could make how we communicate much better. Most people don't have that, but you need it. And so I wrote a book about it, and I think people look at it and they go, oh my God, this is so simple. And I'm like, right, but is it easy?
No,
because you're not doing it because it's not easy.
When I think about the amount of thought, I don't think I put more thought into anything than I do trying to thoughtfully explain something to my son.
Yep.
When he like sees something he doesn't like, something that hurts his feelings, or like, I'm like, oh my God, I have to articulate this in a way that like, because he's going to latch onto this.
Yes.
So how do I articulate this in a way that is like mindful and considerate, but
Yes.
safe, but like thoughtful and like,
and still gets him what he needs.
yes. And still give him what he needs
Exactly.
without putting a seed in his mind
Right.
that misdirects him.
Right. And that's the same thing in the workplace. It's
This
the
is
same
literally
thing.
what you just explained.
Yes, it's the same thing day to day. A lot of times what I tell people is like, the way I try to approach the work of equity is not to get you to remember a bunch of definitions. I try to frame it like explaining sex to an 8-year-old. You're not going to explain sex to an 8-year-old the way you would explain it to like your partner. You know, like your partner, you're going to be very explicit, right? Because you're like, yo, we need to fix the thing. I want this, you want that. How do we make it work, right?
Right.
But like when you are talking to a young child, you're going to be thoughtful because you don't want to lie to them about sex, because it is important that they at least understand it, especially given the lay of the land we're in right now with pedophilia and the internet and all of that stuff. So you want them to have some awareness.
Right.
But that awareness doesn't have to be as adult as if they are engaging. But you want them to have like the right words. You want them to have the context. You want them to understand when they can and cannot discuss this. You want them to have a sense of idea where this belongs in their brain so they know how to engage with the material with the right people at the right time. That is not easy. But sex is simple.
Right.
It's simple. It's a simple thing. You know what I'm
that.
saying? It ain't easy though. It ain't easy.
And for some reason we can't figure out why it's not easy.
You know, because it's a lot of people doing it not well. Okay, so you know, it's not easy, but it's simple. We all kind of like, you know what I mean? Like it's like, oh,
we'll figure it out.
Exactly. And so I think that one of my goals when I think about the work that I do from an equity perspective, and I'll be very honest, most of the time I'm super frustrated that like what I do falls into that box. Like it's the DEI box.
I literally don't think it falls into that
and everybody
box.
says that to me. They're
And
like,
I
what you do isn't
understand.
really DEI. But I'm like, but what is it otherwise? Right? It's humaning well. But where does that fall when you're talking about in a corporation, when you're talking about in a community? That is equity. That's where it falls. That's what it is. And so the problem is that like we've just had this big movement of people, you know, talking about this thing in a specific way. And so we tend to think of it as like this workplace thing that we have to do a certain way. And I'm like, no, this is like literally your life. The conversations we're having now, the politics that we're engaging with, the messaging that we are, you know, sharing as it relates to like our thoughts about this or that on the internet, like all of that is equity.
Right.
All of it. And it's either being done well or it's not. All of that is about being inclusive. All of that is about communicating well and building connectivity. All of it is. And either you're doing it great or you're doing it badly. And so I try to give people the tools to be able to do it well, even if they can't define like what this is well. Like even if they can't like rattle off like, okay, allyship is blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? But do you know how to do it?
Right.
Because a lot of us know how to do things, but I mean, I can tell you what it is. How many times you had that experience with your son where you're like, I'm just going to have to show you.
Yeah. No. It's like, I've told you 3 times how to tie your shoe. Like, can I just
let me just show you.
Right. Watch
like,
mommy. Right.
Yeah, watch me. And so this is the same thing. You know what I mean? The conversations that we're hearing about, you know, the way different identities are treated around the globe. That's an equity matter. The conversations that we're having about the experiences that certain people are having in the workplace, the experiences that certain people are having about applying and what that, you know, interview candidacy experience is for different folks based on their identities, whether it's because they're Black or brown, whether it's because they're disabled, whether it's because they need remote work, whatever it might be. Like all of that is that. But we don't talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in those ways. And so when I do, people are like, that's not what I thought that was.
Right.
And I'm like, but it is. Everything is.
We're literally all going back to elementary school.
Facts.
That's literally what.
And we should. And by the way, some of the stuff they teach you in elementary school is wrong. It's like not done well. You know, we were just talking about this off camera where it's like when you're young, they teach you don't stare.
Right.
But they don't tell you that like, but you can still engage. You know what I'm saying?
But we ignored the differences. We tell our children to ignore the difference. Because you have taught me that. My son's been like, Mommy, hers so fat. And I'm like, and immediately, like my natural instinct is like, don't stare at her and don't say that. And learning these humaning things from you. I'm like, okay, Cameron, she looks very different than what you're used to, right? That's
right.
And he's like, right. I'm like, that doesn't make her different.
That's right.
Like that is just,
it's not bad.
You see, and it's not bad. And that's okay. But we also don't want to point that out because we don't want to make her feel out of place because she's just like us.
And you also don't need to ignore her.
Correct.
You can still talk to her. You can still engage with this person. They live in a different container than you.
Right.
That's it. That is it. You don't know the reason why. You have no idea what the backstory is. In fact, if you get to know them, it might be a juicy backstory. You know what I'm saying? And something you would be like, wow, people need to hear that. So like, it's that. It's like, how are we thoughtful about peopling with each other so that it doesn't have to feel like, if you don't fall into my neat little cookie cutter boxes, I don't even just want to engage at all. Like, how do we stop that? Because by continuing to perpetuate it, we're limiting our accessibility to the clothing we need. How often have you gone and tried on a pair of pants and you're like, yo, y'all just don't want nobody with hips to wear these pants? You know what I'm saying? Like nobody. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's affecting how we are doing clothing. I chair an organization called Brown Girls Do Ballet. Do you know how long it took for shoemakers to understand that Black and brown dancers have whiter feet? It's how we're made as people. So like, we didn't have accessibility to the way the shoe was made. We also had to address the colors the shoes came in, but like, we didn't have accessibility as far as that was concerned. Nobody thinks of that as a DEI thing, but it is.
Right.
It's an equity thing. I can't buy a shoe that fits my foot.
Nor at the color of my skin.
Nor the color of my skin. So like, it's literally like, this ends up coming back to like every single thing that you are engaging with, you have a moment where you can make a decision about it being a thing that is equitable, not just for you and in your myopic, limited perspective. It is equitable as widely as possible. And the more you stop going, oh my gosh, I don't want to look at the woman in the wheelchair because I don't want to feel like I'm staring at her. I'm just not going to engage. The more we get away from that and move toward, oh wow, there's a person in a wheelchair. You know what? I'm concerned she go down that aisle. Let me figure out if I can maybe help her with that. Or maybe, oh, it looks like she's looking up. Maybe I can grab something for her. If we approached it just even that way, instead of just can you imagine the isolation of just being ignored because you have to move about the world differently? But we don't think about those things. We don't.
I'm blown right now.
But that's how my brain works. So like, and then people are like, it's not DEI. I'm like, well, it is.
It is, but it's not. And I'm almost like, what a failed mess it is that is called equity. When in reality, I'm like, that to me just sounds like, it just unveils how inconsiderate we are.
Yeah.
Because we've been told not to consider people that are different. Just ignore them.
Ignore it. Don't stare. It's rude. Don't. And so we interpret don't stare, it's rude as don't engage at all. and we are isolating people. We are isolating people who are not, what we expect them to be appearance wise. We are isolating people who don't speak the language that we speak because, oh my gosh, my ears have to do more work to understand you. Right? Like, how ridiculous is that? But it's a thing. We are isolating people whose bodies work differently than ours, whose skin tones are different than ours are, right? We are isolating them, or we're staring at them and making them incredibly uncomfortable. And so like the thing that I just think people could do a much better job of is just understanding that like difference exists, which it seems ridiculous that has to be a thing we tell people. Because I think most of us would like really readily be able to define the ways that we're different. In a lot of ways, we feel good about it. Like you're like, I'm different because I'm great at or whatever. You know what I mean? Like we know what our uniqueness is and we value it. But when it comes to other people, we just want them to be one thing. Oh, you're the person in the wheelchair. Oh, you're the Black girl. Oh, you're the person that's from another country who I have a hard time talking to because my ear doesn't understand your accent. Or you're the person who's middle-aged and antiquated and doesn't understand how to move with the times. Or we do that for other folks. We put people in these places and we make the decision that that's where they live and that's what it is. And we choose whether or not we're going to engage. And I'm not saying that you have to engage with every single person that you come across, but I'm just saying if you are going to human in the world, like the least you could do is try to do it in a way that's inclusive of the many differences that exist among us and open your aperture enough to consider how those differences shape their life and ultimately shape yours. I'll give you another example. I recently had a conversation with someone who was like, I do not support the canceling of student loans. I do not support the canceling of student loans because I had to pay mine. And I was like, okay. Well, consider for a moment the person who is under student loan debt, who has gotten student loan debt to become a professor. We know that teachers don't make enough money. They are therefore still paying their student loan debt. They are also struggling to make sure that their bills are being paid. As a result, they have children who are not getting all of the things that they need all the time, right? They're getting the bare minimum. When those kids have an opportunity to have a quick little come up by stealing a little this or that, or lying about a little this or that, how likely is it that they're going to do that? How likely is it that if we just eliminated the student loan debt for someone who's literally teaching our young people, that they could have a better life and then could be more present for their children and could also provide for them in a way that would reduce the likelihood that those kids have to commit crimes or do small petty things that could ultimately get them in trouble and make the entire situation worse? Like, it's not about you and your student loans. It's about what student loans are doing to the operation of how we engage with each other.
But this goes back to what you say all the time. What is it? It's not everyone all the time.
It isn't. It's not every inclusion does not mean everyone is going to be in the center every single time, all the time. It can't happen.
So why have we made like beneficial things like that and the need to be inclusive?
Right.
Because I thought about that when there's a college in New York where a woman made this massive $1 billion donation.
She's a Jewish professor. She's a Jewish woman. She was a professor at the school.
Her husband dies.
Leaves her all this unexpected money.
She donates it to the school. And
$1 billion.
And starting next semester, people this semester will be paid back for their tuition. Starting next semester, it will be free.
It will be free.
Ongoing. Mm-hmm. And I read that and I thought, this is a game changer. And right after that, I thought, somebody's going to be so damn mad.
People are pissed.
Somebody's going to be
People are pissed.
So
people
mad.
are pissed because they've already paid.
Yep.
People are also pissed because she's Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
We know being Jewish right now is, there's a lot of anti-Semitic behavior. There's a lot of frustration with Jewish identity. There's a lot of lack of understanding of like the fact that you could potentially be Jewish, but not support what's happening over in the Middle East right now. Like there's a lot of really complicated things about it. So you're seeing comments around that too. Like, well, she should have donated the money to help, Palestine. Like, so like, nobody owes you their $1 billion. You know what I mean? Like nobody owes you that.
The entitlement we have to be included in everything. Why?
Yeah, that.
Where the hell did that come from?
And people are mad about it. And I'm like,
that is literally like standing outside of a race. They place first, second, and third, and you're like, where's my award?
Exactly.
You're outside.
I ran last week. I didn't get my award for running last week.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, it's exactly that. And my thing is, I'm like, do you know how much debt and burden doctors are under? Do you know that experience you have where you go to the doctor and you're like, why am I waiting so long?
Yeah.
Why is the waiting room this crowded? It's because they need the money.
Right.
So if I didn't have school debt, I might not have to take 507 patients a day. So I could pay attention to the ones that I'm seeing because I'm not working triple time to try to get out of debt because I decided I wanted to be a doctor.
And save lives.
Everything ain't gonna be about you.
In debt. Right.
It's not gonna be about you. It's not gonna center you every single time. It's not. The world would be terrible that way. Do you know when people like pineapple on pizza and I think it's disgusting?
I love it.
So like, no, can't happen.
This is where we disagree. Are we still friends?
We are.
Are we still friends?
We definitely are.
I know disagreements these days can cause the
You can end it
friendships.
immediately. I'm done. We're out. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, yeah, we have to get past this idea. I think social media has made it worse.
Yeah.
You can curate your own little like universe of people who are like your worshipers and minions. And so now we just think like the world should be.
It's very clear she lives in Atlanta. Can you tell?
I do see a lot of the social elites.
Someone said yesterday, and I'm like married to it. She was like, I don't believe in imposter syndrome because at this point in my career, I've seen enough imposters to know I'm not one.
Correct.
And I was like, valid. That.
Particularly in Atlanta. Yeah, there are a lot of imposters. We use the word scammers, but yes.
Okay. I was being kind.
Right. It's a thing though.
Takes one to know one.
Exactly. Facts. But yeah, I know a lot of people don't think what I do is equity, but it really is. It's really, the way I opened it in the TED Talk is I teach people to be good humans because that's really what it is. I want you to think about your place in the experiences that you're having with others. I want you to be thoughtful about how you communicate. I want you to be thoughtful about how someone will receive that. I want you to be prepared for the possibility that you didn't fuck some shit up. Right. And somebody's gonna need to like let you know, and that you're able to receive that feedback. You know how many people can't receive feedback? Like they cannot handle it. They're immediately in defense. Doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. Ooh. They can't handle it. And I'm like, yo, that is a part of like how this system works for us to get better.
I heard what you said, and I'm always thinking in the mind of the listener. And I think the work you do is so important. But in order for the work to work, people need to ask stupid questions.
Of course.
And so here is said stupid question. When you gave the example of like people being more considerate and in the workplace, and when you do see those different things, now this could vary based on like someone in a wheelchair versus someone who is Black or brown, right? But in your like, be more considerate, like be more intentional about those relationships. I also think someone might be thinking like, okay, I hear you, and I want to be intentional and considerate about a relationship with someone who may be in a wheelchair, but I've been taught that I don't want to make them feel like I pity them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be like, oh, do I need to get that door for you? Or, oh, do you need anything? Like,
yeah.
And I think you do an incredible job of being considerate and intentional without throwing anyone a pity party. But I think that alone would give people an excuse not to be more considerate.
Yeah, I think if you want an excuse to not be considerate, we have millions of them. I can hand them out like Valentine's. Like it's very easy.
Here's the jar.
Here you go. You know what I'm saying? Halloween candy bowl. Pick what you want.
Right.
So like if you want a reason to like be like, oh, I don't know if I should do it because I feel awkward or whatever, like you're gonna feel awkward. The thing I tell people is like you're going to have that feeling between your nose and your navel that's gonna make you go like, ooh, I don't know if I did that right or if I should have. But the thing you just have to be open to is correction. So I am willing to approach someone who appears to need help and say, hey, can I get the door for you? Hey, do you need me to grab that for you? And I'm open to them being like, no, I can get it on my own. And being like, all right, I just want to offer the option. Where is the risk in it? Like, what is it other than you just being told no? Like we have to generally, if we are going to continue to human together responsibly, we have to be okay with getting no's. We have to. No's help us have safety. No's help us get to the opportunities that we deserve. No's help us create boundaries. So we have to be okay, just the same as I think we have to be okay giving them, we have to be okay getting no's. And so it's one of the things I teach in my classes, like, listen, you have to create the kind of experience where you are okay being wrong. Because when it comes to anybody else, you're probably wrong. You're going to make assumptions. You're going to, it's something as simple as like how a name is pronounced. I'm often caught off guard when people are like, Cabral. I'm like, oh shit, you said it right. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times people are like Cabral or Cabral or Cabral or whatever. And I'm like, none of those are right? Like, but I don't have a problem correcting people, and people should be willing to be open to correction, because if it's your name, you want it to be said right. So I get to want the same thing. And the problem with us teaching our young people and then carrying it into adulthood, this whole idea of like, just don't engage at all. And just kind of like, don't stare. And just kind of ignore the differences and treat everyone the same. Is that, I mean, just even the expression you made, like, it doesn't,
I was like, ew.
It's a horrible experience, right? It's a horrible experience. Where do you get the connectivity? When do you ever feel seen?
Right.
Where do you get the richness of life from? Like, we get that when people see us.
Right.
And people who are quote unquote different, and the different could
we
be
literally
something
want to
simple.
be seen.
Literally everybody does. And that's not to say everybody wants to be seen by everyone all the time, but everyone wants at least the opportunity to be seen. Seen, safe, heard.
Seen, safe.
That's what people want. I want to feel seen. I want to know that I'm safe. I want to know that if I have something to say, you're going to hear me. You know, I had a whole moment. Remember my last podcast where I was like, you know, we shot my podcast. I was like, y'all are not listening to me.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because there's something that is just, I mean, it's so internally destructive when you do not feel heard. And
right.
so like literally the work that I do.
Oh, I say that all the time. I'm like, I get the most mad when I feel like people aren't listening to me.
It's like you want to just like jump out of your own skin.
Yes.
Like, what is happening that you don't
Am
know?
I saying this wrong?
Literally. Literally. It's exactly that. It's like it's a cringy, frustrating. And so I'm like, can you imagine walking around and just because, I don't know, you have a prosthetic arm, or because you happen to have like, I don't know, a preference for purple hair, or because you have a unique clothing style, or you have an accent, or, you know, people just aren't seeing you. Mm-hmm. I had a person, a gentleman that I used to work with when I was at Walmart, and he's Israeli. I hope I'm not butchering this. He was either Israeli or Iranian, and I hope I'm not ruining that. But in any case, point being, he had come to the U.S. He's been in the U.S. for a while, and he had just become a really skilled marksman. Like, he had gone through a bunch of courses with the NRA, and like was really just into like shooting. And that's a thing to be proud of. Like, you know, like shooting is a hobby. There's sportsmanship around it.
Right.
But you happen to appear in a particular type of identity from a particular part of the world that we associate with terrorism. Mm. And so he would say to people, oh, here are my accomplishments. And he would mention that. And I would watch people like immediately, like this immediate body language, like this cringy moment. And I had a pointed conversation with him that was like, I want to share with you something that you probably don't see, but I want you to be aware of so you can continue to thoughtfully frame it. I don't think you should not share that you're good at this, but I want you to make sure that you are sharing it with the awareness that people could be hearing it differently than you intend. And he had this moment like, I hadn't even thought about that. I'm like, I understand. But there is a little bit of something that's happening that you don't know could be creating distance between you and the people you're engaging with. There's two sides to this experience. There's the first side, which is I need to think about what people see when they look at me. And I need to be prepared to navigate that. Is it my fault? Is it my responsibility? Is it, you know, like in a lot of ways, no. But if I want to have a particular experience, the very bare minimum I can do is be aware that like, you know what? Yo, I'm a little Black girl from Detroit about to walk into this really, really white corporate event right now. What do I need to be aware of? Just that I, you know, want to be able to be prepared to navigate. Okay. So that I can do that. I also think the other side of that is true, that you need to be open to the possibility that this normal experience you're having with all these people at this corporate event, there could be a couple people in the room that are a lot different than what you expect. And you should be able to navigate that. And it should not mean that you have to pretend they don't exist. And so my reason for telling him was not for him to change himself, but so that he could see potentially what it was he was navigating. And he could create the kind of opportunity that would make the person that would ordinarily go, oh my gosh, did you hear what he just said about shooting? Do you know what part of the world he's from? Do you hear his accent? That he would be able to mitigate that and insert himself in a way that creates more engagement. And ideally, we'd be in a world where people would be open to it. That shit's hard. It's simple. It's not easy.
It's not.
And it's both sides.
I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, okay, wait, this is bigger than intentionality and consideration. Yeah. This is bigger than
that's the
equity.
Core though.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's bigger than diversity and equity and inclusion.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting here thinking, you just mentioned, and this is where I was going, is there's two sides to this. And I'm like, my whole life has changed because I have a you. Secret weapon, ta-da! Because I have a you, but I think there's a flip side to this of like, in order for me to be considerate and intentional and be willing to receive no's and feedback, I also have the secret weapon of someone that I can have very open conversations with of when I am wrong or not being sure when I am wrong or being afraid to have the conversation because is this wrong?
Right.
And I think there's this like gray area of like, who can I have the conversation we had around during your shoot, which was like, literally, I went to a coffee shop that morning, and I've told this story on your podcast. I went to a coffee shop that morning. The cutest, I love a cute coffee shop experience.
Yeah,
it's like a
cute.
family-owned cute coffee shop. Sign me up.
Right.
So coffee's banging, the little breakfast sandwich
Oh
is
my
banging.
gosh, so good.
It was so good. I went 2 days in a row. It happened to be completely Black-owned.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like videoing it because I'm like, Instagram needs to see how cute this coffee shop is.
Yes.
And I literally type on the caption on my story, cutest Black-owned coffee shop I've ever been to. And I go to post it and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I don't think I can say that.
Can I say Black-owned?
Can I say Black-owned? Like, it's great to support more of what you are, which is actually the opposite of what we're talking about right now. But I'm like, but if I post that, someone could be like, ma'am.
And I was like, why would they say ma'am?
Right. And so, but
you had the benefit of having someone to ask.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I came home. Well, I'm calling it home. I came back to the Airbnb.
Right.
I was like,
I mean, Atlanta's home now.
Hello, second home. I literally came in and I was like, Amber, this is the shit you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Like, can I say this? And you were like, you absolutely can say this.
And you should.
And you should.
Because you live in that container. You living in that container saying things is going to land. And that's what I mean when I say have the self-awareness, right? If I go back to the story about this gentleman that I'm talking about, which I hope he's not watching this episode because I can't remember exactly where he's from, but he's an amazing guy. He sends me hilarious things on Instagram. But anyway, like there is something valuable about having awareness about how people are receiving you. And so like, that's when, like, you know, I talk a lot, and this is in TED Talk as well, like your privilege, like you have to know it. And like part of your privilege is that you're walking around in a white body. You know what I'm saying? And so you saying things in certain spaces, in a lot of influential spaces, is going to carry a lot more gravity than me saying it.
Yeah.
And so I want you to say that it's a cute Black-owned coffee shop. I want you to tag them. I want you, you know what I'm saying? Because you are opening the perspective, you are opening the aperture so that folks are like, oh, it's not just Black folks that go to Black coffee shops. By the way, it's not. And so like, that we need that. But you're right. Like sometimes we don't have the person to ask to know, can I do this? And we're too afraid to take the chance. And so what you did that was different is that you were like, yo, I want to post this, but I don't know if I should. And you came and asked me. Many people would have just been like, ugh, I don't know if I should. I'm just not going to do it.
I'm not going to do it. I'm never going to say anything.
And I'm never going to say anything about it. I'm just going to move away from that because I don't know how to navigate in that space. And what I want more people to do is be willing to take the chance and navigate in the space.
This is almost a tad bit daring.
I mean, is it? I mean, like the worst you're going to get is a no. Please get the no's.
But can you be a little bit more courageous?
Yes.
And being intentional and considerate in spaces that you don't know how to navigate.
Yes.
How crazy is that?
It's not
crazy. We risk ourselves in every other compartment of our lives.
But we don't feel like it's risk because it's familiar. It's familiar. And like, I think, you know, I just feel like if we were willing to just consider a little more, to just be receptive of a little more, to just see the value in a little more, we could ultimately get to the place that we all say that we want, which is, I am looking for equity, access, safety, opportunity. I am looking for that. If we were less confined by, it needs to look like this, it needs to be this way, or I shouldn't even engage with it because I don't know what to do. Like we are literally shutting out entire livelihoods, experiences, opportunities, connections, access. And let's be real, y'all cut me off. I want mine. I would like my access. You know what I'm saying? I want my opportunities. Right. I want my resource. I want all of it. And I can't get it if you're in the way because you're uncomfortable, because you want to be awkward instead of engaging. And like, even if you engage and are a little awkward in the engagement, I would rather that. And so like there has to be, we just have to do as humans, And this is, I want to just kind of make a small point here. And I think that this is clear, but I want to make sure. This is not to say it doesn't matter if you're Black. It doesn't matter if you're brown. It annoys me to no end when people are like, it doesn't matter where you come from, or, it doesn't matter if you're poor. It does. It does. It shapes your entire world. Yeah. It influences your decision making. Yeah. It affects who you're able to connect with and build relationship with. When you finally get to the point where you have money, suddenly now you've got to figure out how you navigate these two worlds together. Like there's a lot of nuance there. If you come from poverty, if you are a Black person, if you are a queer person, if you are an overweight person, if you are a very tall person, like there's a lot of things that can get in the way of your experiences. Your uniqueness absolutely matters. But the way we get past it being obstructive is creating a world where we are expecting that people will see us. And we are expecting that people will, at the bare minimum, be willing to engage with me civilly. When the majority of the time, people just want to ignore you. Oh, that's weird. I don't know what that is. I'm not engaging. And it's shutting all of us off from the richness of the people that we can be. And I want mine. I want mine. So for me to get mine, y'all got to play along. So I'm out here in the world trying to preach to everybody like, listen, figure out what your privileges are. Get comfortable with them. Figure out how other people are not experiencing that. Figure out the story around them not experiencing the privileges that you have. And then figure out how you can extend your privilege. Because likely, whatever privileges you have an abundance of it. She gave away $1 billion.
$1 billion.
It wasn't all the money she got. Okay, that wasn't it.
Like there's plenty left.
The fact that you had $1 billion to give away.
Right.
Okay, there's your privilege is a place where you have a ton of abundance. And if you were just willing to just share that and share it responsibly, like the impact that we could all make is like, it's not impossible. And it's something that we all have. So like, why don't we do it?
Can I say this? I think I've never told you this, but you teaching me how to constantly acknowledge my privilege and how often it exists and shows up every day has almost eliminated the thought of envy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like,
because you're rich in real life. You know exactly how.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm like, and even when all the times where I was like fed into the whole dynamic of like, well, people are going to want your life and blah, 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 blah. And then I'm like, no, I have this in abundance.
I have so much to share.
You don't need to envy anything. You don't need to look at me and think I have anything that comes easy to me, you can have some of.
That's right.
Anything.
That's right.
Even if it is walking around in the body that I was born in.
That's right.
What can I extend to you?
Right. That's right. But like, there's not enough of us that like have gotten good enough to do that first step. What are the privileges I have? And the unfortunate thing is that there are a lot of identities that like have been taught to believe they have no privilege. Like, a lot of Black folks think like, I don't have any privilege. What do you mean? I am Black in America. And I'm like, do you know the richness of Black identity? Like that alone is a wealth.
It is a culture that is copied.
The culture is incredibly, never duplicated, but like absolutely, attempted to be imitated. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's like there's so much robustness to that and so much value. There's so many things that people who are, wrapped up in their own existence that also happen to be marginalized don't recognize are privileges for them, that create, a lot of the time I often share with, my gay friends, like, I'm like, a lot of gay men are very disarming. They're fun, they're playful, you know what I'm saying? So like, it is a bit of a stereotype. Yes. But like that little joyfulness,
it brings out the childlike behavior.
It makes
I'm giddy again.
It makes people play. It makes them connect. It makes them laugh. So it's like, that seems like nothing to you, but that's a privilege because so many people don't have anything to connect with. So it's like, if we can just do a better job of just like literally looking at like, what's the value that I have? What's the richness that I have? What's the thing that makes me rich in real life? What's the thing that I have like an incredibly large abundance of? What's the thing I don't even think about? And it could be small things. Like I often tell people, like, can you go into your local CVS and pick up bandages in your skin tone? That's a privilege. Can you buy hosiery or lip balm and all that stuff in your skin tone? That's a privilege. Like, are you able to navigate the world in a way? Like, do you have to figure out, oh my gosh, who's going to braid my hair? And like, that's a tough thing because you live in the kind of community where hair braiding is hard to find. Or is that something that's easy for you? You know what I mean? Like, so it's like me living in Atlanta as a Black girl is a privilege. Right. I have lived in Bentonville, Arkansas. I used to fly to Atlanta to get my hair cut.
Oh my God.
Okay, because I was like, ain't nobody here about to touch my head.
Never.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's us at least having the awareness to say, like, there are still privileges and there are things that are very easy and very natural for me. Facts.
The way you think.
Facts.
Having access to your brain makes me feel like I'm privileged.
Total privilege. And guess what? I give anybody who's around me will tell you I'm incredibly nurturing. I'm super giving. I'm very generous. I try to be, because I recognize, like, I don't even have, it's effortless. It's pouring out of my body. And so it's like, how much better would the world be if we just took a moment to be like, I have power here.
I have a ton of this.
And I don't even have to think about it.
Nope.
It's just right here. People tell me all the time, oh, you're super confident. I don't try. I don't think about confidence. I don't wake up and I'm like, we're going to be confident. Okay, like, it doesn't happen. I'm confident. I wake up that way.
Right.
And then I go out into the world. And you know what I do with my confidence? I open doors. I ask questions. I push back. I challenge. I say things that other people are hesitant to, because I have the confidence to do that. And I know that there are other folks in the room that won't. And so, like, what does that look like for you? What is the privilege that you have? Now, what are the people around you that don't have that privilege doing? What's their experience? Why is it that way? Have you gotten to the point where you're willing to get to know them so that you can then say, oh, I see an opportunity where I can extend my privilege to you, and do it in a way that doesn't feel like pity, and do it in a way that feels like, I see something. Is this a good way for me to step in? I would love to share in this way if that works for you. If we had more of that, like, you know, all this clown mess and the ridiculousness we got going on, all this banning books bullshit, all that shit would be out the window. No one would be tolerating that shit. The idea that we need to remove and eliminate and shut shit down comes from an unwillingness to accept that abundance is available to us. And I just refuse to believe that shit. Like, I just don't. I'm not participating in it. So that means I need y'all to take a look at the abundance you have, so you can figure out what the fuck you can share, so we can all get ours. Right. Because I don't want to live in a world where we're fucking banning books and, like, stopping people from having access to medical care and all this other goofy shit just because they look different.
And being who they are.
And loving how they love, or like whatever. Like, I don't want that. And so I think my attempt in the way that I teach DEI is to remove that. I don't want to tell people, oh, don't, you shouldn't use, Shaniqua, you shouldn't use your name. You should maybe just put
don't put your picture on
or
the
put
resume.
Shani. Don't put your picture on your resume because now we gonna know that Amber's a Black girl. Right. Like,
let them figure that out when you get there.
And guess what? When you get there, if it's a problem, it's still gonna be a problem. So like, why don't we create the kind of world where folks are understanding that, like, I could encounter a Black girl named Amber. That's interesting. Let me go ahead and engage with her and see what the hell comes out of that, because I don't see a lot of those. Or like, I could encounter, someone who is a member of the LGBTQ community who happens to have also gone to MIT and be an amazing whatever. You know what I'm saying? So like, we do not have right now what I consider to be the resilience to navigate difference. And what I try to do is give people some fundamental foundational tools so that you, at the very least, have the resilience to navigate difference. And for the people who don't want to, fuck it. Shit, we ain't gotta engage. It's enough of us that want it. Right. So like, ignore them. Shit. Like, I don't pay attention to none of this, the goofy shit, right?
Yeah,
like,
the people yelling outside of the race. Let them. Bye.
It's fine. Right. Whatever. All the people are like, take your resume, take your picture off your resume, all that. We got LinkedIn applications, baby. If they want to know who I am,
with a link to my profile, literally, with my photo.
Click. Yes, okay, like, so it's like we're living in a world where, like, we're gonna be visible and the differences are more visible. And a lot of us are proud of those differences, and we're proud of that uniqueness, and we're willing to talk about the ways that even some of our oppression has shaped who and how we are. We have discovered ways to identify resilience and value in our oppression. Like, there's so much value to just our humanness. If we could just get better at, like, talking about it and extending it and being willing to hear the differences that others are experiencing, it could totally change the world. And it doesn't require all these goofy ass laws and programs and shit that we're doing right now. That's never gonna work. We don't like to follow rules. When the fucking humans follow rules?
Not never.
We don't. We don't. So I'm like,
every time I do, I regret it.
Man, every single time. This is Andre, like, on steroids too, by the way. He was like super the not follow. Listen, we went somewhere. This is a random twist, but like, we went somewhere where, like, they told him, you can't have your phones. Like, put their phone in the, like, little lockup thing and you hold it until, because you can't take video on the thing. And he realized that they would not have known that he had a phone if he hadn't been like, oh yeah, here's my phone. And he was like, I'm not putting my phone in that thing. So he goes back out the venue. He's like, oh, I need to go back to the car. So they unlocked his phone. He puts his phone in his pocket. He goes for a walk and comes back with his phone in his pocket. Like, I'm not telling people I got phone. I said, no, why you can't record? He was like, I don't care. I just don't want to have my phone. This is my point. Okay. People don't want to follow rules. We don't.
For the sake of following rules.
For the sake of following rules, we just don't. We're like, yeah, this is silly. I'm not doing it. I don't want to do that. And so like, that is just, I mean, that's a tiny little example, but like, we're just naturally rebellious. Most humans are. It's what moves culture forward. It's what moves opportunity forward. But there's a way to be rebellious and do it responsibly. There's a way to be able to engage and communicate and connect and all those things and be like, yo, I think I'm doing this right, and be okay when somebody's like, actually, like it's a lot of resilience, and we really got a lot. And I want us to build more. And so I try to teach things in a way that give people the tools to be able to navigate, so that you have the opportunity to have resilience. Because if you have it, then the world gets better.
If you made it this far in the episode and you still don't quite understand what's going on, let me break this down. The things that this woman has taught me has literally opened the floodgates. And there's like level 1 and level 2 to this, right? Like there's a level 1 of like acknowledgement where I was like, oh, I didn't know I had privilege. I didn't know that there was a different way to operate in the world. I didn't know that these small minor nuances could literally change. One, acknowledging and these small nuances could literally change the way that like I operate in the world and the people around me.
Exactly.
Very simple things.
Mm-hmm.
2 was learning them so well, putting them into practice, and realizing this is actually a very big responsibility of the very small thing that I can do.
Yes.
As a person versus just looking at the problem and often saying like, we ain't never fixing that shit.
And I don't know what to do.
And I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so this opened the floodgates for me where like, I see now in my everyday where I fuck it up, where I fix it, where I'm like, oh, you would have did that differently last year, but you don't do that different now. It opened the floodgates for me. And like, I even see my privilege every day.
Yep.
And then I'm like, how can I extend it? What can I do? And so you may have heard this whole episode and it may have been very eye-opening, but the thing I love the most about Amber is she's an incredible teacher.
It's a couple things too. It's a couple tips too. Because finding your privilege isn't easy.
She grazed over this framework.
I did.
So I'm going to directly ask her so that you catch this at the end of the episode. Can you please go over this framework again? This 3-step framework.
Yes.
Of like, listen to this part. Listen to this part. Because if you are looking at the grandiose problem that we all feel that exists in the world, that is, we are not inclusive enough. Situations are not equitable. The places we work are not equitable. Like, this to me is the thing that you can do right now.
Yeah.
Where it's like, fuck, this is obviously Rich in Real Life After Dark. Fuck everybody else, right? I'm just going to do what I can do. Mm-hmm. This framework to me is like, this has been something that I have been able to acknowledge, implement, and practice every day.
So 3 steps. First, the first step is you have to acknowledge your own privilege. Most of us are like, what privilege?
But I'm not privileged.
Where's my privilege? Do you know how much debt I have? Do you know how my parents and my upbringing and blah, blah, blah? Yes, all of that can be true.
Me fighting for my pity.
Yes. Please see me as oppressed.
Okay. Fighting for my oppression.
Right. And we are. Many of us are. Not negating. There is oppression. But we all also have some privilege. Like I said, I always tell people, can you take a trip to your local grocery store and speak the language of your community? If the answer is yes, that is a privilege. There is someone that's navigating that environment that literally is not able to be understood and has to rely on, hopefully, someone being able to interpret what they're saying. So you just being able to speak the language of your community is indeed a privilege, right? So figure out what your privilege is. The way that you do that, ask yourself this one question, simple question, does take some work, not easy question. What about me or my experience is normal or regular or typical? Is the container that I live in really typical? Do I have typical use of my body? Do I speak the language typical of my community? Do I have a typical upbringing? Did I have a typical educational experience? Do I have typical relationships with my parents or my friends?
Name. Yep.
Right? What about me? My skin tone, my container, the way I sound, right? How you look and how you sound is almost always the grounding, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what about that?
And that privilege gives me access.
Yes. So what about that? And once you get clear about that, then you start to be able to say like, oh, people are struggling because They can't walk the way I do. They can't talk the way I do. They don't look the way I do. They don't love the way I do. They don't have the education I have. And now you start to see where you're actually privileged. This is not to say you don't still have oppression, but you also still have the privilege. Let's get clear about that. Once you get clear about that, the next step is to say, okay, who doesn't have that? Who doesn't have that, and what's their experience? And let me try to make sure I understand it so I can empathize.
Right.
Because I know what it's like to be in this and all the privileges that come in it. But like, if I didn't have that, what might that look like? Let me go and figure that out. Let me learn about what the experience is if I didn't have the same, ability with my body, if I didn't speak the language of my community, if I didn't have, access to running water, whatever. Let me figure out what that would look like. A really simple example of this is I was in an Uber. I take Uber all the time because I hate to drive, but I was in an Uber and I was in the backseat. I am, doing my little Duolingo, trying to learn Spanish. I did not take Spanish in high school. So I'm like literally starting from ground zero.
Right.
And so I hop into this vehicle and the gentleman said hola to me, which lets me know, okay, you probably speak Spanish. And so I, was on my phone kind of tinkering, and we hit some traffic, and he was trying to explain to me, I'm not going to go this way. I'm going to go this way. But he did not have the language to explain it to me in English. He had like parts of it, but like not all of it. And so I intentionally waited and let him kind of work through it. And he, did the best that he could. And I still didn't quite understand what he was trying to tell me. So I pulled out the app, Google Translate, and I turned it on so that he could say it into the mic and it would translate for me what he said. And then I said to him, okay, I understand. I appreciate you telling me that. Where did you learn to speak Spanish? And he said, I grew up speaking Spanish. So now we're having this whole conversation on this phone app. Do you know how many people would never have bothered?
Right.
He doesn't have the same privilege I have. He's living in the United States where we think that like English is like the way, you know what I'm saying? Like, so he's like living his life speaking Spanish, like, right. You know what I'm saying? So he's like totally living in this world where like people are probably encountering him and are like, I'm not going to talk to you. You don't even speak English. We've seen videos on this on my Instagram. Like, but I was willing to engage and say like, hey, what's your experience? And as we were talking, he was like, I actually would like to get better, but I need someone that I can consistently talk to who knows Spanish, but maybe English is their primary and Spanish is my primary and we can figure it out. And I was like, you know what? I know someone that can help you with that. So I got his email address, and this is all over the app. I have the privilege of speaking the language of this country. Mm-hmm. You do not. There's an opportunity for me to extend my privilege to you because I know someone that can actually meet that need that you're describing. You're a total stranger. You're an Uber driver. But I am able to empathize with that experience and therefore create an opportunity to do what the third step is, which is extend my privilege to someone else. What is your privilege? Who is not having the experience of that? And what experience are they having? Let me learn about your experiences. Let me develop empathy for that experience. That's the second step. And then the third one is, okay, now I get it. Here's how I can extend. Here's how I can at least offer to extend. You have to be open to the possibility somebody can still tell you no. He could have been like, no, I don't want you to introduce me to anybody, Right. But I at least have the opportunity to extend the opportunity. And he was like, oh, I would love that. Here's my email address. So like a week later, I got him and this woman connected. Hopefully they're, speaking English and Spanish to each other. But how often do we miss those opportunities because we don't even see the privilege in the situation? We don't consider the opportunity to extend our privilege to someone else. I'm like, if we could just do those three things, like just those three, how different would the world be? How much more access would we have? How much less poverty? How much less oppression? How much more access to opportunity? How much more information? How much safer might it be if we could just get those three things? So like, I don't know if I want to call it my life's work, but like that shit matters to me.
It does.
It matters to me a lot.
And it matters because what is this also called?
It's allyship. It's allyship. Nobody likes that word anymore, so I don't say it. But right. That's what it is.
And it's humaning.
It's humaning.
Well.
It's humaning well. I tell people all the time, I teach people how to be good humans. That's what this is. And like humaning well is labor.
Right.
It's labor. And it should be. Like, it's billions of us.
You have always said that allyship is labor.
It's labor. You're going to get uncomfortable. You're going to get called out. You're going to get bad feedback. You're going to have people correct you. You're going to, sometimes people going to get mad. How many times I've played videos in my classes and people have been like, this video is offensive. And I'm like, I am so glad you're this passionate about it. Let's talk about why you're mad.
Right.
Let's talk about it.
Because it's very real.
Because listen, the anger is valid. Let's get to the root of it. Now let's also talk about why someone else is experiencing this and they're not mad. And they want you to see it. So like, I'm just committed to like creating a world where we get the experiences out on the table so that we can get to the place where we all get what the hell we deserve. Because I want mine. Again, I want mine. So that's what we got to do to get there. I'm willing to play the game.
The money, the respect, and eventually the power.
Exactly.
Said that backwards, but Amber,
Thank you.
That was so good.
We did it again.
We did it again. Thank you. That was so good.
Yes. This was good.